Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, the purple angel, the purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, the host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks, and I'm thrilled that you are with us today. We're going to have an exciting conversation about some tips for those dealing with memory loss and various forms of dementia today. But before I get into introducing our guest, we always have new listeners, and they're always wondering, who the heck's Alzheimer Speaks, and what do they do, and why do they do it? So I like to just take a couple of minutes in the beginning to let people know who we are and what we do. Bottom line, I started this company because my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years. And so Alzheimer Speaks is really an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. I got tired of dealing in what I felt was a broken system, and I wanted to have honest, authentic conversations to learn where resources were. And so that's really the core of who we are and what we do. We believe that joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having everyday conversations like we do here on the radio, with our blog, with our videos, and so forth, is really the only way that we're going to remove stigmas that are attached to memory loss and help people that are diagnosed and those that are caring for them continue to live purpose-filled lives and to help them build on their relationships and instead of letting it crumble them. At our core, Alzheimer Speaks that believes that collaboration is really the only way we're going to win this battle. And I know that that's working thanks to each and every one of you. You see your likes, your clicks, your shares got us named the #1 influencer online according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz, and also got us recognized by Maria Shriver this last fall as an architect of change for humanity, which were huge honors. So we hope that you'll continue to see our content as valuable and continue to, click away and share it with your spheres of influence. If you have Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest or LinkedIn, it doesn't make any difference. Just push the information out there because there are so many people in our own spheres that are dealing with this that we don't even know. And people won't reach out unless they feel comfortable. And typically we all feel more comfortable when we see something as being more common than not. So thank you for your time and energy and work to help us shift dementia care. I also want to let you know, as a listener, you could be our next guest. We interview people all over the world, from those diagnosed to family and friends caring for a loved one, or who have a story that they would like to share, to businesses and professionals. We've had movie directors and authors and singers and songwriters and researchers on, and advocates. So there is no limit. If you have a story to tell, I'd love to hear it and talk with you about that. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest today. Again, we're going to be talking about some quick tips for Alzheimer's and dementia care. And we are really lucky to have Celia Koudele with us, who is just doing some fabulous work. Her mother, her grandmother, and her aunt all died from Alzheimer's disease. She has worked at the Alzheimer's Association in Central and Western Kansas for 9 years as a Helpline Specialist. So I'm sure she's heard most of everything that could be asked out there. She is also the author of The Little Book for Alzheimer's Caregivers, which she wrote to help other families who are dealing with this based on her lived experiences. So welcome today. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. I'm just thrilled to have an opportunity to share with your audience. And this is a scary road, and some days are wonderful and some days are not.
Yep, isn't that the truth? But in life in general, that's really how it is for everybody. We just always seem to look at it in a different light when there's a chronic illness to be had. I want to ask you a little bit, if you wouldn't mind sharing. I had mentioned that this is in your family, your mother, your grandmother, and your aunt all died from this disease. Can you talk about time frame for you and how that all looked like?
Well, it kind of started, my dad died from cancer at 75. And kind of when he was maybe about 73 and my mom was maybe about 72, my dad began calling and saying, your mom doesn't want to cook anymore, and she's just agitated all the time. And, of course, my mom lived far from me, and I didn't see her very often. And, she was fine on the phone. You couldn't tell there was a problem. And I didn't know, back to what you're sharing here, I didn't know that agitation was one of the symptoms, because by the time my grandmother began living close to me, she was past the stage of being agitated, and she was very docile. So I didn't see that side of my grandmother. And so, and of course, once I got involved in the Alzheimer's Association, my dad died at 75, and then my mom came and lived close to me. So I saw her every day for dinner and noticed she was searching more for words, and she had a mini stroke, and lots of things kind of contributed to that. And like many caregivers out there, I kept thinking, oh, she's just having a bad day, or she's just thinking about my dad, or maybe her blood pressure is high today. And I had lots of reasons to, lots of excuses why that's not what it was, because I didn't want that to be. Mm-hmm. And so what happened with me is my mom had what they called peripheral neuropathy. And the vitamin B in our system is the vitamin that helps nourish our nerves. And so she got anemic because nobody was checking her vitamin B levels, and that's how she got neuropathy. And so we took her to Mayo's to find out if she would be paralyzed from the waist down. And they said, no, I think she'll still be able to walk. And we said, would you test her for Alzheimer's? And they said, oh, yeah, but she's probably going to have Alzheimer's. So that's how we got a diagnosis.
Oh, wow. It's amazing how you have to ask.
Yes.
When you're bringing
absolutely.
them in.
And denial is so comforting. We, even though it was in my family and we knew, and I used to talk to lots of caregivers about that, as long as I can pretend like she doesn't have this disease, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to financially, emotionally, physically, help her, because in my mind, she's not that bad.
Yeah. I did the same with my folks when I was younger. I always looked at old as being 10 years older than them, because then it was always safe. And then my dad had the nerve to go get brain cancer, and my mom got dementia. And it was like, well, pop my bubble,
Yeah, this is not my plan.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny how we do that to protect ourselves from the situation. Like, that's going to make it stop. But it's very, very common. And I would imagine that you heard a lot of that on the helpline.
Yes. Oh, yes. People would say, well, and even in my own family, when my dad passed and my mom lived closer, my sister and I saw more of her. And, my sister would say, well, how was mom today? And I'd say, well, gosh, she couldn't remember my name, and she was having a hard time walking, and seemed couldn't remember I was there. Some days when she lived close to me, she would call me, because these were old cell phones, the old bag phones. Mm-hmm. She would on the bag phone, and she'd say, where are you? I haven't seen you all day. And I literally had left her room and hadn't gotten in my car yet.
Yep.
So, but as you say, it's so comforting. And yet my brother would call like once a month. Well, she could fake it once a month for a phone call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Appropriate things. How are you? I'm fine.
Yep. And we hear what we want to hear.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, of course. And I finally put her in a facility, because at this stage in my life, my mother was getting pretty confused and kind of going through the depression that lots of times goes with Alzheimer's. And my mother-in-law, whose name was Dorothy also, they were both Dorothys, got sick also. And I couldn't take care of both of them. And so my mother went and lived close to my sister for a while, because, my mother didn't understand when I said, I've gone to take care of Randy's mom, my husband's mom. She didn't remember I had anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's real common. And I heard in one of your things, Laura, you just the one I listened to recently, this lady was talking about her dad being ill and being in a restaurant with him. And one of my favorite stories is that I took my mom for my birthday with my sister and grandchildren, and we were all sitting in this restaurant. It was kind of noisy because we talk about how, sometimes the background noise is disturbing for them. And so we were sitting in this restaurant, and my mom starts yelling. And I said, "So what's the matter, Mom?" And she said, "Why did you bring me here?" And I said, "Well, because we're celebrating my birthday." And I said, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, I don't know who any of you are." So it was a very sudden thing. There was no warning. We didn't know she didn't know who we were.
Mm-hmm.
We were all her children and grandchildren, and we were sitting next to her and talking, and it was like, oh, my gosh. So then we had to go around the table and introduce ourselves and how we knew her.
Yeah.
It was very sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, that's a tough one for most families. And I know something when I go out and speak and train, that's probably one of the most common questions I get is, why doesn't she know me? Or how are you dealing with that? Or is it okay to not visit anymore? Or should I still, they're looking kind of for permission and guidance of what to do. What would you tell people if you, if they're asking, is it worth me still being in their life if they don't know my name? What advice do you give people?
Well, yes, I would say, I guess I have two versions to that. The first one goes that, they have proven that people that are in a coma still know you're there, even though they can't talk to you. They may be just laying still, and maybe you can hold their hand, but they have proven that when they come to, that they heard you. Mm-hmm. And so as much as if that's so, people with dementia, even though they can't remember your name, and they maybe are not sure who you are, in their heart they know. There's a famous story about a little man that goes to visit his wife in a nursing home, and he goes every day, and somebody says to him, "Well, why do you go? She doesn't know you." And he says to her, "Well, but I know her." So I think sometimes I think deep down in their heart, the Alzheimer's people know that there's somebody, you've come to visit them and you love them and you care for them, or you wouldn't be there. They mm-hmm. know that in their heart. And the other thing I think is sometimes you have to do what's right for your conscience and how you feel about it. It's kind of like I used to have people call and say, "Well, I'm doing all the work for Mom, and, my brothers and sisters aren't helping, and they never come to visit, and they don't send them money." And I say, well, but you have to do what's best for your conscience. You have to do what's best for your conscience, because when the end of the road comes and you have to say goodbye to your loved one in the grave, you have to know that you did what was best for your loved one as long as they were alive. You have to come to terms with your conscience. So I usually tell them that if you can take that, then you need to go. And sometimes they have wonderful days, and if you don't go, you miss that. Mm-hmm. My best story is my mom had her birthday, and I had a dear friend who made a cake for her, and it had cream cheese and Cool Whip in it. And you could tell my mom didn't know what the white stuff was. She had this blank look on her face, and my friend took her finger and put her finger in this, cream cheese Cool Whip, sugary stuff, and put it in her mouth. And my mom just grinned from ear to ear, just like a little kid. It was priceless. Just priceless. There were no words that we could explain to her what those things were, because she didn't know anymore. But once we put it on her tongue, she just grinned.
Oh, yeah.
So, those are the memories. Those are why you go.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree, and I use that same phrase that we understand that people with a coma, can still take everything in. So can a person with dementia, and it's surprising. Yeah. Even when we think, they're not going to be able to communicate, you get those little nuggets, those little tidbits every now and then. I remember a time when my mom said my name and she hadn't said it in 3 years. And
gift.
Yeah, and I just bawled like a baby for like 2 hours because I forgot how much that meant to me,
Yeah.
And I remember kind of having a conversation with God about, I was like, feeling, oh, what was me, and just heard, this is a gift. You need to share this with others. This is a gift. You were given a gift today, Lori, And
Absolutely. And along that line would be, I'm big about sharing my books with anybody that comes in my life that I think needs one. And today, my husband had a doctor appointment, and we ran into 3 different people whose mother or father had Alzheimer's within an hour's time.
Oh, I can believe that.
It's so prevalent. It is so prevalent. Yeah. Everywhere.
And yet everybody still has that denial mentality that it isn't. And I mean, there's just absolutely no denying the impact that it's having on not just our country, but our world as a whole. And
yes, well, and you're absolutely right. And I listened to your thing about from the caregivers or from the Alzheimer's, the young onset people on your website. And they were talking about the different things that how the caregivers feel. The young onset people feel toward the caregivers. And one of the gentlemen said, "But sometimes I'm angry at my caregivers." And like you were just saying, I think sometimes I want to take caregivers and then just wrap them in a hug or a warm blanket. Because they don't know. They don't know, Lori. They don't know how this journey is going to be, and everybody's different. And just like you say, it's prevalent everywhere, and they don't want to know. And then once they need to know, there's so much to know, and every day is different. It's so hard for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it makes it, I think, so much easier when people can actually talk and have an authentic conversation and not worry about how it's going to be received, knowing that they've got a safe environment. That's just huge to people. And they'll usually tell us over and over, you don't need to fix me. It'd be nice if there was a cure and all of that, but just validate me, just listen to me, just let me know I'm not alone, and that you will support me as a friend, but you don't have to take on the responsibility that if you can't fix me, then you want to walk away because it's too hard for you.
That's absolutely right. Lots of times they just want to talk. I used to have a little lady that would call into the helpline, and she just wanted to talk. She didn't really want anything from me, but she just needed to vent, and that's okay. So we talked about, well, how does that feel, and what have you tried, and is there anything that's made it better? She didn't want me to send her any information. She just wanted to vent, and I think that goes for the Alzheimer's people, and it goes for the caregivers. Sometimes they just need to talk.
Yep. Yeah, it's such a simple thing to do, but we're so uncomfortable with it. It's kind of amazing how difficult that is for people.
Yes, I have a good friend she had several surgeries, and her mother had Alzheimer's like yours. And she's kind of going through the stage where she doesn't know her husband's the caregiver, and she doesn't know who he is, and she keeps saying, so where's my husband, and where's my husband, and he keeps saying, I'm right here, and same thing. She wants to vent about her hallucinations, or she wants to vent about, she's seeing little people on the floor, and she just wants somebody to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And some days it's all gibberish and it doesn't make any sense, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge thing and he feels bad because if he takes her out in public and that happens also. Sometimes you worry about if you go in public. I have known caregivers say about, well, gosh, my loved one got so agitated at the restaurant because she thought the waitress wasn't bringing her tea. Well, the waitress had filled up her glass like 5 times, but of course she didn't remember that. Mm-hmm. And she was in the agitation stage, and she was afraid she was going to make a scene in the restaurant. But, life happens. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You'll move through it. Yeah, very much so. Can you tell us, with your book, again, it's called The Little Book for Alzheimer's Caregivers, what can people expect if they purchase that book? What can they expect to find?
Well, hopefully two things. There's lots of Alzheimer's books out there. I started when my mom got sick with a 36-hour day, and I read the first chapter, and I began bawling and decided my mom's not going to do that. And not to mention, I didn't have time to read it all. I was busy caregiving, and so it's short because people need an answer now. Like tonight, all of a sudden, my mom doesn't want to bathe. So what can I do to get her in the bathtub? It's been 4 days and yada, yada, yada. And so, you need some ideas now. And so there's specific tips on most of the subjects that Alzheimer's have, like bathing, wandering, how to get a diagnosis, what to do before you go to the doctor, wandering, hallucinations, sundowning. So I tell some tips in each chapter about those specific things that are most common. And then at the end I say, my thoughts, and throughout these explanations of some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's, I tell my story. My story's in there. People that know me and read my book say, well, it sounds just like you, but that only helps my friends because they know me. But it has lots of tips and stories and kind of guidelines. And I had somebody just ask me yesterday, so in her case, her mother, her grandmother, her uncle, and her aunt all had Alzheimer's. And she says, every time I forget something, my husband and my children say, oh, no, you've got Alzheimer's. Oh, no, you've got Alzheimer's. And she doesn't like them saying that to her. And so this has ideas about, what can we do? One day at a time. Don't worry about every little thing you forget. Alzheimer's isn't just memory loss. It's lots of things. What kind of things to watch for? I had somebody come and say, so my husband keeps going to the garage looking for things and he doesn't come back in with them. Well, so it has ideas about, so where do I begin? What do I do if I'm suspecting that there's something not quite right? Well, I usually tell families to keep a journal first because, it's not one thing, it's several things. And once you go to the doctor, you may be upset enough that you don't remember all the little things you saw in the last month. So write them down. It helps us all. We all make notes. So write them down. So together you can talk about, these are the things I'm worried about, and these are the things I'm concerned about. And then live your life. I used to have people come and say to me, so Alzheimer's is such an awful disease, and I'd say to them, well, so do you know some good diseases?
Yeah, that's a good comeback.
There aren't any, and Laura, you and I both know because we both had a parent that died from cancer. That wasn't so pretty either.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard. Alzheimer's is an entirely a different thing. It's not like anything else, and lots of times caregivers will say, well, I got my mom to do such and such, and then I tried that today and it didn't work, and that's because it's a brain disease.
Yep.
So we talk about how each day is different. We talk about trying different things. We talk about, the book talks a little bit about, siblings involved. And I went to a workshop one time that talked about families. And sometimes families have what we call pigeons. They live far away and they fly into where the full-time caregiver lives. And then they tell them all the things they've done wrong. And then they fly away. Because, they aren't going to help. They don't send money. They don't stay and help do services. They just fly in and say, oh, the caregiver should do this and this and this, and then they leave. And, spending a few hours with someone with Alzheimer's is not like spending 24 hours with someone with Alzheimer's. And lots of times we know that in the early stages is a lot different than the later stages. I talk about some of the different stages and how it's different for everyone and how to deal with family things. I talk about, what about the end, what sort of things, what's that like, what kind of things you need to look for, the things that I was afraid of as a caregiver, about placing them in a nursing home. How do you make that decision? I know you had a gentleman that talked about taking his mother in. It's different for everybody. Some people have little children at home and then they're scared of Granny because Granny says inappropriate things or does inappropriate things. And I had another friend that told me about, their Granny came to live with them with Alzheimer's and she was just a crazy old lady. And so they spent more time with the crazy old lady that was Grandma than the grandma that sat and read them stories and they had wonderful memories of. So their kids, it altered their children's lives and their children's views. And so people lots of times don't think about that. It's not just you, the child, that's bringing mom in. It affects your whole family if you have a family living with you.
Mm-hmm.
So it has tips about, think about the different options. What's it like to bring them to live with you? How do you pick an assisted living? What's the difference between an assisted and a nursing home? I did a presentation one time for cops, and we talked about the behavior of people with a form of dementia or Alzheimer's, and one of the cops said to me, well, if they can get that mad and angry, why don't you just lock them away in a nursing home? And I said to them, well, do you have any idea how much a nursing home costs? And they were just appalled.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's a whole nother version of our society, teaching cops and firefighters, what happens if they approach somebody? What do they say to them? How do they help them?
Yep.
So those are some of the things that are in my book. I tried to make it user-friendly. I tried to make it large print because I'm older and don't like little print.
Uh-huh.
I tried to make it handy and user-friendly. I tried to put my life stories into it as well as things that they could use right away.
Yeah, that's I think that's so important. And that's one of the things I liked about your book is it's not huge. It is big print. It's laid out really simply. Like one of the things, when you're looking for a topic, I just open it up and it says exhaustion. And everybody gets there, the person with dementia and the person caring for somebody with dementia, and how you can help with something like that. And you've got communication techniques and telling people to, be vigilant and know your own reactions as well as theirs. It's a very easy book to be able to pick up and put down because sometimes people don't have a ton of time, but it's really easy to find where you left off the way you've designed the book. So I find that extremely helpful because that's what.
Thank you, Lori. I tried to make it more user-friendly. And I found even for nurses and for people that are working in assisted livings and hospitals, I did a presentation for like 200 nurses one time, just because, there are dementia people on every floor of the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
They break their legs, they have cancer, they have issues. And what we found when I worked at the Alzheimer's Association was we would have doctors come in and do some training with us just as far as to find out what sort of resources were out there and to gain information. And if I have to pick between the doctor stopping me from bleeding to death and starting my heart, I want them to know that first. But secondly, I want them to know something about how to talk to an Alzheimer's person. I would have doctors that would say to my mom, well, Mrs. Wilson, how are you today? Well, of course, Mrs. Wilson was fine. My mom was always fine because she didn't remember calling 10 times a day to say, I need to go to the doctor. She didn't remember that.
Yeah.
So,
well,
all to have those kinds of doctor visits, yeah.
Well, and it's kind of like when you bring your car in, it gets better. I think for most people, you can be sick and you go to the doctor and they ask and you want to be fine. So you tell them that you're okay or you downplay the symptoms. But, when it's a person with dementia, one of the things that I found really frustrating with doctor's appointments was they would ask my mom. Well, my mom doesn't know.
Yes.
So you need to understand the disease to know who to, and not to exclude her, but you need more information than just that as a source, because she can easily not remember or not give an accurate picture of what's actually going on.
That's a perfect description, and one more step farther than that. When my mom was sick, and she went to the doctor, and then they wanted to put her in to do something. I can't even remember what it was for, but they hooked her up to IVs in the hospital. But same answer. The nurses didn't know anything. They'd say, well, how are you today? And my mom would say, fine. And they hooked her up to IVs, and she got so upset she was hallucinating. She pulled all the IVs out, and then we had blood and a mess everywhere because she didn't know what that was.
Yep. Yep.
And the nurses didn't realize that if they would just cover her arm so she didn't see it, that would have been better for her. And then we talked about different things, with the nurses. They could use a little lavender oil, or they could do different things, give her something else to do. They would come in her room and they'd say, well, here's the bathroom and here's the closet and here's this. And by the time they left, she didn't know where the bathroom was.
No. It's like sitting at the restaurant and they give you 45 types of salad dressing and say, which one do you want? I don't even think I want a salad anymore. Is that what I ordered? I mean, it's overwhelming.
It is. And my mom was just overwhelmed. Same thing. They would bring her this plate of food, and the instant it came, I would always split with her. But the instant it came, I had to split half of it onto my plate because, she was just overwhelmed by food and things. And you're right. All those questions.
Yep. My mom would say, I didn't order that. So I started, because she would forget what she ordered, and then she'd be looking around the table at everybody else's food, envious of what they got. And so finally I got to the point with my own mom. I would ask her, I would tell her, Mom, I can't decide. Would you mind, if we get two different things and just split it? And so then we had this variety that we could both choose. And it was like, oh my gosh, that was a lifesaver. Because we had to stop we couldn't go to the buffets because she'd have 5 plates going and, put one down and pick up another one. And she wanted to be able to read the menu, but she couldn't. And she wanted to be able to understand the waitress or waiter that came to the table. It was too many choices. And so that just alleviated so much of her angst in terms of going out when I initiated. It's like, because then she's helping me out.
Yes, that's a great idea. And that goes right back to the communication, because my friend that has his wife at home, and I take him lunch and we talk, and his wife keeps saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I used to tell my caregivers, I'd say, well, but if you tell her she is home, she's not stupid. Yep. In her mind, she needs to go to either a childhood home, or she needs to go, it's a happy place. She wants to go where she's healthy and life is good and her kids are home and everybody's playing. And, if you tell her she's home, she knows she's not in that spot.
Yep.
Doesn't look right.
Exactly.
So you have to communicate with where they are. You have to go where they are.
Very much so. Can you tell us, what do you think are the hardest parts of, being an Alzheimer's or dementia care partner?
Well, I think, we talked about that a little bit. I think the exhaustion comes because I really feel like you're on call 24/7. We used to have, my mom, we thought she needed to have a phone in her facility, and so we gave her a phone, and we gave her 3 little buttons for 3 kids, so she could just pick up the phone and punch a button. Mm-hmm. So in the morning, she'd call about 7 o'clock and maybe catch us still home, and then she'd call each of us like at least 10 times during the day. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, she forgot we all went to work.
Yep.
By the end of the day, we had all these messages, and she was really mad by the time we got home because why hadn't we returned her call? Mm-hmm. She's still willing enough to know that. So explaining to her, well, Mom, I'm sorry, I love you. I'll be up to see you in a few minutes. Those kind of things. Because I felt bad as a caregiver that this was my mom. I wanted her to be happy. I didn't think I was doing all the right things. I didn't know enough. I wanted her to be happy. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't be there 24/7. So I think there's a lot of guilt that goes with being a caregiver. Mm-hmm. And you only have so much time, and it's all kind of a hit and miss from picking a facility to medications. I mean, I learned lots about medication. They kept using words I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what all those drugs were, to what's going to make her feel better. I didn't realize, there's a study about pain. There's a study that they took, there's a study about Alzheimer's people, and they put Alzheimer's people that were going to have hip surgery, and then normal people that were going to have hip surgery, and the study was to see who got more pain medication. Mm-hmm. And of course, that didn't have Alzheimer's got the most pain medication because they could ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
They could interpret pain. They knew what it was. They knew how to ask for it. So and I worked at, after my mom died, I worked at the Alzheimer's Association for a few more years because
you never worked until after she died.
Yeah. No, she was still alive. Anyway, so I think people don't know that Alzheimer's people can be in pain, and lots of them are. This is a neurological disease, and we have the most nerve endings in our skin. And so sometimes when they just hit the edge of their bed or because they bruise or any of those things, it may be pretty painful. Mm-hmm. And because they can't process that. So I think those things as a caregiver, I wanted to make it better, and I didn't feel adequate. I didn't think I knew enough. I wanted to make it better.
That's good. That's good. Do you go out and speak to a lot of groups, or what is your role now? Are you still with the association?
No, I'm not. But I do go out and speak to lots of groups. I am retired from the Alzheimer's Association, but I do. I'm going out in a few weeks to go to a place that has a facility and it has dementia units and it has nursing homes and has assisted living, and so they asked me to come and speak, and I speak about my book and I speak about Alzheimer's disease, and people love to come up and ask me questions, and I'm just more than happy to help. Sometimes I go to churches, sometimes I go to support groups in churches, just any place that I can help because there's such need. I have a daughter-in-law that's a physical therapist, and she got me in contact with our Wichita State University here. And once a year I go and I speak to the physical therapy class there because, most dementia people end up needing some physical therapy, and that's not something they teach.
Yep. Yeah.
So I try to do that also, and I love being involved and young people, the things that they don't know that can happen, mm-hmm. which is many things with an Alzheimer's, and try to teach them. Another thing that goes with this is we talk a little bit about in their waiting rooms, in a doctor's waiting room. Well, my mother used to get so anxious in a doctor's waiting room because, she didn't want to look at her attention span was pretty short. She didn't want to look at magazines very long. She didn't understand the TV. Her TV channel had to be the Weather Channel and the History Channel because, she would get upset about anything else she saw. Mm-hmm. And she thought they were, she was so excited about the History Channel, she thought they were building the Hoover Dam one day. She said, they're going to have this wonderful new dam, and it's going to be terrific. And she was so excited because, of course, she didn't know that was History Channel. Yep. But I used to talk with doctor's offices and things about having, you're very good about posting resources, and some of the things I used to tell my caregivers was about the Alzheimer's Reminisce magazine, mm-hmm. that it's a good magazine to look at with their loved one because my mother may not remember what she did yesterday, but she remembers that old-fashioned stove she used to cook on, and she remembers wearing an apron every day, and she remembers the car that they had when she got married. So those old pictures would bring back memories of the old days. So I used to always tell my caregivers that I thought that was a good resource because that gave families something to do. You were talking about going and seeing their loved one, and what do grandchildren and great-grandchildren do when they visit? Well, they can take the Reminisce magazine and it's pictures of the old days, and they may not have said a word, but if they see a picture of the very first car they had, they may be able to tell you about it.
Yep. Very true. Very, very true. I'm wondering, in some of my notes here, I've got something that says that there's over 50 different types of dementia with their own issues. And I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about that, because I've heard everywhere from like 72 to over 200 different types. And I don't know if anybody really, really knows how many types there are because our researchers don't talk as well. And there's multiple, some people have multiple diagnoses of dementia. So
yes,
let's
right.
talk about that a little bit and what your thoughts are on all the different types and which ones you feel are the most common.
You're absolutely right. Because I had a dear gentleman that came in to visit me one time, and he said he came and spent an hour with me, and he says my wife has Alzheimer's. What can you tell me about it? And so we talked about the symptoms and the things he might notice, and he left. And so he called back a couple days later, and he says, "Oh, I won't need that information. She doesn't have Alzheimer's. She has dementia."
Mm-hmm.
So there was this long pause. And so then about a week later, he called me back and he said, "Oh, so I guess we need to talk some more about dementia and Alzheimer's." And I said, "Maybe." So as you say, it's common. I remember I had someone come in that had Pick's disease. People don't talk much about that, and I haven't noticed much on your websites about that. That one's not quite as common, but when I first heard that word, I thought the very first person I knew that had Pick's disease, a client, they were literally picking at their skin until it was raw.
Mm-hmm.
And so they called for some suggestions. What can we do? We can't get them to leave it alone. We've tried different kinds of drugs and et cetera. So I thought those had some relation, but not necessarily. But they were also a young onset person. So they had it under the age of 65. So over the years, I've known some people with Lewy body. I've known some, as you say, sometimes they have Lewy body and they have another type. But people sometimes will come to me and say, "Well, my loved one never did that. She was always very happy and docile." Well, that doesn't mean she didn't have Alzheimer's. It just means it was different for her.
Mm-hmm.
Or I hear about people that can be very agitated and angry and, get into the guns and get into all sorts of things. And just because they're very agitated doesn't mean they don't have, as you say, Alzheimer's and maybe Lewy body or a combination of things. I heard, I got this number I heard a neurologist come where I live. We don't have any neurologists that just specialize in Alzheimer's or
mm-hmm.
just Alzheimer's and dementia. And I had a person that came from Kansas City, and she gave a lecture one time. That's where I got the number 50. And she said, well, that they had a few in Kansas City, but lots of times neurologists don't want to see just dementia and Alzheimer's people. They want to see other things because, let's face it, it's pretty depressing. They can't cure it. They don't know what we can do. There's lots of research out there, but it's still going on. And I used to have people with it. Oh, I also had somebody talk to me about, she was a specialist in Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about the dementia that Parkinson's people have is lots of times better than an Alzheimer's dementia, because the Parkinson's dementia, lots of times those people still knew who you were, whereas Alzheimer's people lots of times don't.
Mm-hmm.
In my family, my grandmother didn't know anybody, and my aunt didn't, but my mother started out with multi-infarct dementia, and then she eventually got Alzheimer's. So she knew me until just before she died. So, and they were all related in the same bloodline. So it can be really different for different people. And as you say, the symptoms can be different. And research, you mentioned researchers. I always encourage family members and caregivers when they're looking into this to do some more looking about the research, because oftentimes they hear an article or they see something on Facebook and they don't read enough to find out, well, so how many people did they study? Probably 17 isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had one years ago. They did a study where they were trying a new vaccine, and they studied 6. And one of those ladies got better for a year, and then she regressed to before. So same thing. If you're reading research, you need to read the whole article. You need to see how many people they studied, what period of time they studied, because, it's a developing field and there's lots of factors. And my favorite is when people call me and say, they have a pill for dementia. They tried it on these mice and they got so much better. So there's lots of really smart mice out there, Lori.
Yep. Isn't that amazing?
Really smart. Now, I need to tell you, because we have talked about a cruise, and then you can ask me some more questions. I just want to tell you my story about cruising and my mother. So over the millennium, we asked my mom, because she was still kind of with it then, so what would you like to do for this 2000, this millennium? Well, she wanted to go on a cruise, because my mother had been on lots of cruises, and she loved to cruise. okay, Mom, so every day for a year, Lori, we talked to my mom when we visited her about this cruise. Remember, it's only so many days, and, some of the grandkids are going to go, and we're going to go on this cruise, and you'll love it, and it's a big ship, and, on and on. Every day we talked about it, Lori. So the day we actually got on a plane and got to the cruise ship, and we took her to her cabin, her first words were, "Oh, I didn't know we were doing a cruise, but it's okay." So even though we talked about it every single day, it's such a short-term memory thing. It was by then that she couldn't even remember that we talked about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now my mom was pretty confused by then, and somebody always had to stay with her, and she couldn't find her cabin and those kind of things. But a wonderful. Remember that sometimes it's not as much about the person that's confused as it is those people around them. When my kids went to go spend time with their Nana, they were wonderful memories for them. And same thing, when caregivers and families go to visit the person with dementia may not remember that they had ice cream together, or they had popsicles, or they laughed about jelly beans, but the rest of the people do, and we all deserve wonderful memories.
Yep, we sure do, and there's lots to be had if we just take the time to make them or notice them when they exist. A lot of times I think we miss them.
Yes, we must remember, and I always tell families, one day at a time, just one day at a time. I went to see Still Alice, and I've been watching your clip about your movie, Our Neighbor Phil, or My Neighbor Phil.
His Neighbor Phil.
His Neighbor Phil, and it looks just wonderful, and we'll talk some more about that. But that's always a mixed blessing for me because part of me is, it reminds me of memories of my mother, and I'm sure you too. And the other part is a fear that may be my future. Mm-hmm. It's my past and maybe my future. So the answer to that is there's lots of us, Lori, that have our background but I only got today like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You got to live in the moment and not get drowned out by possibilities of what ifs, because none of us know what the what ifs in our life are going to be, and we can't control them.
That's right.
We can do the best we can. What is the best way for people to get your book, Celia?
Okay, so the best way to get it is to go to Amazon and put in my name, Celia Koudele. Then it'll come up, my book. And it also comes on an ebook. If people have more time to read that on their Kindle on the train or whatever, that's an option. Mm-hmm. And it's on an iBook too. My hubby says here. My website is ALZ Caregivers.net.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more.
And you can look there also. And if you same thing, you can if people want to email me or contact me through my website, they can. And as I say, I do some speaking things for churches or anybody else. My whole passion is all about helping other people through this journey. If somebody can learn from my experiences to make their journey easier, that's what it's about.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us. It was just a very fun conversation. And again, the name of the book, you can Google too, is The Little Book for Alzheimer's Caregivers. The Little Book for Alzheimer's Caregivers. And it's a really easy reference, easy to read book. And again, I just opened up a page now as I'm going through it, and it just slapped me in the face that we need to talk about this just for a couple of minutes here. But you have a real short section in here about sibling battles, which I think is really common. I hear about that all the time. How do I fix my siblings? What would you say to someone who wants to fix their siblings?
Yes, because, caregivers have enough stress, I think, by themselves. If you're the child that's taking care of mom, you have a lot on your plate. And then, siblings may come and say, but I think you need to put her in a rest home, or I think you need to give her more drugs, or I think she needs to come live with me, or, there's lots of stress to doing that and lots of decisions. And if you are the person that are in charge of making those durable power of attorney decisions and you are control, doesn't mean that your siblings like it. Mm-hmm. So they can have lots of opinions about what you do. And I used to do this at the Alzheimer's Association. We just have a family meeting mm-hmm. and have everybody come together and talk about the pros and cons and about the disease, and sometimes having a third party involved, somebody from a church that knows something about Alzheimer's, a friend that maybe is a nurse, somebody from a facility. Different places have counselors that will give you some advice about the disease and the progression. Just because she's happy and not very forgetful now doesn't mean that she won't eventually be. So I think educate. The more the family knows about the disease and the stages and the symptoms that they could experience. Sometimes they fall, and once they fall, I remember being dumbfounded that, how come they can't walk? Mm-hmm. How can you forget to walk? Well, you can, and they do. Mm-hmm. Just part of the disease. But if everybody, all the family does, the siblings don't all know that can happen, they might think, well, it doesn't matter where they live. They can live in the country because they can still walk. Well, maybe they can today. But educate, be informed, do it in a loving, caring way, that we need to talk about mom's care, what might happen, how we can take care of this. We need, and the other huge thing is whoever's in charge and the one that the family member that's doing the most caregiving, it's a godsend. If one of the other siblings will come and 24 hours, the main caregiver gets off. Mm-hmm. She can go pay her bills. She can go see her grandchildren. She can have a vacation, because then the other siblings appreciate what she's doing, if that's an option.
Yep, definitely. Well, again, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your work today. It's fabulous. And again, the book is called The Little Book for Alzheimer's Caregivers.
And thank you again so very much, Lori, for giving me the opportunity, and we all appreciate all the wonderful work you're doing for Alzheimer's families.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. For our listeners, if you haven't, if you're not really familiar with Alive and Social, you might want to check out some of the other shows on the network there. One of them is called What's for Dinner Tonight with Rachel Perrin, who is a culinary director for Kowalski's Market. And she just does a 10 to 15 minute episode, which is perfect when you're busy and you're trying to figure out what the heck's for dinner. You can also go to Kowalskis.com for easy and delicious menu suggestions, and that's KOWALSKIS.com, KOWALSKIS.com. And don't forget about our Dementia Friendly Conference and Cruise coming up November 11th through the 18th. We're going to be cruising around the Caribbean, and we will have 4 people on staff that'll be part of our educational program, Living with a Diagnosis of Dementia: Harry Urban, Michael Ellenbogen, Lori Shearer, and Mary Reed. And then as professionals, there'll be myself, Cindy Lazinski, who is part of the Dementia Friendly of Northern Colorado, and Kathy Schoaf, who is our travel agent, and she's also an RN, and then Becky Watson, who is a board-certified music therapist, will be with us. If you would like to sponsor or donate to help others with dementia who can't afford to come, please reach out to me at Lori@Alzheimer Speaks, or give me a jingle at 651-748-4714. Our shows here on Alive and Social are all archived, and so you can go back for the last 6 years that we've been doing the shows. And again, we interview people all over the world, so you'll get a real wide variety of of information. Don't forget about our blog and our Dementia Chats videos that we do. I'll be putting one out that talks about the cruise here yet this week. And we have lots of other ones coming up that I need to post as well. But they're wonderful conversation. Again, the Dementia Chats experts all are living with dementia and just gave us some great, great insights. Until next time, have a blessed week. Bye now.
Hi, this is Suzanne Newman, host of the Answers for Elders podcast and radio show. We are the North Star that guides you through the complicated journey of senior care with trusted experts in money, law, living solutions, and more. So join us on this station, your favorite podcast channel, or just go to AnswersForElders.com. Meet the Wayshowers who will help your journey go a lot easier.